welcome to a brand new Friday slot, which I like to call Hi-Fi News, etc. It's going to be flexible, this one. I'm going to see how it goes. So nothing set in stone, and let's see how it works out. It might not. I might have to tweak and chop and change a bit, but we'll see. I'd like to have your comments too, if you don't mind. So what have I got for you today? Well, I've got some hi-fi news, which is part of the headline. And reason for that, as I've said in the past, I want to keep news a little bit more current. I'm doing a bit of catch up at the moment, so bear with me. But I've got 3 items for you today. Next Friday, another 3 items, and so on. Apart from the news, what else have we got? Well, some questions from you good selves. I have delved I have into the comments section, and I've picked 2 or 3 questions from you. And at the very end, I've got a bit of a hints and tips thing. Well, a hint, a tip for you. See how it goes, and I might change things around next week, but that's where we are right now anyway. See what you think, let me know. Now, on Monday, the hi-fi review on Monday, I'm going to be featuring a product from Bluesound, and in celebration of that, I've got a news item from that very company, looking at something called the Powernode Edge. Now, the Powernode Edge is a single-zone wireless music streaming amplifier, a sort of all-in-one, one of those just-add speakers kind of boxes. Priced at $649 or €699 or £599, you can either connect a pair of passive speakers for a digital hi-fi system, or you can add a Pulse Sub Plus wireless subwoofer for a 2.1 stereo system, or the Powernode Edge can power the rear channels of a Bluesound wireless surround sound setup. Now, you can put this thing on the wall if you fancy. Inside is a direct digital amplifier pushing out 2x40 watts, and the Powernode Edge supports PCM up to 24-bit 192 kHz and also mk.ii. Controlled from the usual Blue OS app, you can play music via Wi-Fi, Ethernet, or playback from an external USB drive. Built-in AirPlay 2 is included, as is aptX HD Bluetooth connection. If you fancy hooking this box up to your TV, then you also can take advantage of the HDMI eARC input, which is available on the rear, as is multi-room play if you fancy adding additional Bluesound players inside your abode. Powered by a quad-core 1.8 GHz ARM Cortex-A53 processor, the Powernode works alongside Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, and Apple Siri, and also offers wireless headphone output, front panel touch controls, and can be yours in black or white. And I'll put a link downstairs in the description if you want to learn more. Next up, we're looking at an all-in-one record player called the Plus Record Player. This is a compact all-in-one record player that arrives in a variety of flavors. Now, this one is not exactly new. In fact, it's been around for a while, but I wanted to introduce it into the channel because, well, I may be grabbing one for review, possibly. So this news piece will hopefully act as a sort of, well, introduction, I suppose you might say. Although what I can give you are up-to-date prices, which I received literally on the day I'm making this video. Also, apart from the company itself issuing the odd video on YouTube and possible newsy type videos you may have seen. I'm not really aware of any actual reviews on this one, or if there are, there's not a great deal to choose from. So I wanted to correct that here. Also, while this one might not be too hardcore in audiophile terms, I still think it looks rather interesting. So what you get here is a pro-ject turntable, which I think is a debut. And if it's not a debut, it's darn close. And with the basic model, you get an OM10 cartridge as the default. Now on top is a lid. Underneath is a whopping great chassis. Inside that chassis is a Class D amplifier with a DSP module. The amplifier is biamped and connects to two mid-bass units and a 1-inch tweeter. Bluetooth is included too, and you get a separate remote. Now this is a fairly hefty thing, weighing in at 15 kilograms. There are source and volume control buttons on the front, and you also get a headphone port. On the rear, there's a sprinkling of more ports. You have power, USB input and output, some RCA ports, optical and auxiliary. Price I have for this basic unit is £2,000. There's also a special edition of the Plus record player that includes a carbon fiber tone arm and an Audiophile 2M red hanging off the end. Price for that is £2,200. For £2,300 you get the actual Plus record player unit, and underneath that you get a sort of shelving stroke vinyl storage unit. For £2,500 you get that same storage unit, but on top is that special edition with the carbon fiber tone arm and the 2M red. As ever, if you want to find out more, check out the link in the description. Speaking of storage, and our last news item falls into that category really, although it's rather a specialist storage box. And it is a box. It's from JICO, from Japan, and it's a kind of cartridge stroke headshell storage case. As I say, it's a bit of a specialist item, and I thought it looked rather dinky and rather neat, so I wanted to pass on the news of this one. Now, if you have a plethora of JICO and or Technics headshells, and you're looking for somewhere to store them, then this JICO unit might be the answer for you. Priced at $60, the case itself can hold 3 headshells, and there's another slot to support a standing headshell if you need to do that. There's also another slot in there to store mounting screws and all of those bits and bobs. So that's your headshells. If you want to store the headshell with a cartridge fitted, pre-fitted, because you might want to do a bit of hot swapping, shall we say, then you can do that too in this little box. So as I say, this is a rather specialist unit. So if you have a Shure cartridge underneath your JICO or Technics headshell, well, this is the box for you. It will also take JICO cartridges under those same headshells. Spanning 117mm by 117 by 50mm, this little box weighs 203 grams. Now, JICO isn't selling these boxes just yet. They are taking orders, but they will start shipping next month in October. Now, I don't know about you, but I would love to see JICO expand this idea for other company headshells and other cartridge types. I think it may have hit on something here. That's your news. Let's look at a few viewer questions. And the first question is from One, as in the numeral 1. What was that TV series, The Prisoner? I'm Not a Number? This chap is the number 1. And he says, and I quote, "Hi Paul, Hello. You mentioned, says one, the Sound Deck Mini Feet in this review. He was referring to the Q Acoustic Concept 50 review, I think. And to continue, I already have 4 of them underneath my CD player, and boy, do they make a difference. Glad to hear it. I just have a question about placing these discs under floor stander loudspeakers, which is, and the question he asks is, can you literally place these under speaker spikes? Now I can understand this because floor standers are normally pretty heavy beasts. So number 1 is obviously concerned about making a dent in his Mark II Minis. So I raced over to Sound Deck, the company who produced the Mark II Minis, and I asked that question. I put that question to the boss, and he replied to me, and I quote from Sound Deck, "The spike mark will mark the paint finish, yes, but weight is not an issue. I use this steel for engine mounts on super yachts." So, 1, I think you'll be fine. Next up, a question from Scott Rutledge. And Scott, hello Scott, asks, Paul, does the Funk firm offer upgrade kits for the SL 12000 Mark VII by chance? Well, yes they do. There's something they call the Kit 11 from Funk firm. Includes things like the Boing feet, the Houdini cartridge damping accessory, I think there's a smoothing DC power supply in there, and all kinds of other options and bits and pieces. Now, with the Funk firm, I always recommend that you talk to the company itself, give them a ring, tell them what you've got in terms of turntable, ask them what they can supply. They're quite fluid and flexible. So ask them what's going on right now and how much it costs and what you want, what they can do for you. Have a conversation, have a chat. I think that will be the best option. I'll put a link down there for you and have a chat with the company. And I'm sure between the two of you, you can work out a price. And finally, residing under the mysterious moniker of Under the Silent Tree, our questioner says this: I have a Macintosh MA 5200. Congratulations. This is an integrated amp. It costs $4,500 new. So I assume, Mr. Questioner, you're from the US, I would guess? Back to the question. It has an onboard phono amplifier. Would I still get some improvements by buying a separate, I assume you mean an external phono amplifier? How much would I have to spend to get that improvement? As to what you need to spend for you to hear an improvement, well, that's kind of up to you, really. Kinda. But I know what you mean. It kind of also depends on your budget. But I would start with something like, say, a Moon 110 LP version 2, which you can pick up for around £500. Not sure what the dollar price is, so forgive me. But if you can afford to go more, then go higher still. The phono amplifier, along with, say, the turntable's tone arm, well, it's possibly the most underrated component in any hi-fi. I've actually talked to some turntable designers who rate the phono amplifier much higher than the cartridge in terms of performance and how it affects overall sound quality from a typical turntable. The better the phono amplifier, the better your turntable is going to sound. And before we go, that brings me on to a hint, a tip for you. Now, I know a fair amount of you out there like to warm up your hi-fi before you sit down and listen, and there's a good reason for that. I find the hi-fi relaxes, opens up, becomes less, edgy. Mid-range can sound a bit harsh if you just switch on your hi-fi and then immediately start listening. So I personally also like to warm up my hi-fi before I sit down to listen. If you don't like to warm up your hi-fi, that's fine. No criticism, but I do. I like to warm up the hi-fi first, And then, I don't know, give it, say, half an hour. I use valves on my main reference system. So sometimes I give it a bit more than half an hour, maybe 40 minutes, because those valves heat up, of course. Thing is, though, something hit me while I was doing reviewing. I recall I was reviewing, what was it? It was a pair of speakers. I had warmed up the speakers. I had warmed up the amp and the phono amp, etc. And I sat down and I had my laptop with me. I was making notes as I was listening. And I started listening to the speakers I was reviewing. And I was quite disappointed, to be honest. I can't remember what they were, but I had high hopes for these speakers and they didn't sound as good as I thought. So I was typing away, a bit disappointed, etc., etc. And 10 minutes went by and I was listening still. And I thought, well, actually, maybe they're not as bad as I originally thought. So erase, 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 delete, delete. They're okay. They're maybe not as bad as all that. And then half an hour went by and I thought, actually, they sound pretty good. Now, why? Why is this? And it suddenly hit me that the longer I was listening to these speakers, the better they sounded. Let me remind you, I sat down to a fully warmed up hi-fi. This shouldn't have happened. I should not have been hearing a change during that half-hour period. And I thought, the turntable was not part of that warm-up. So the turntable was in the frame as far as warm-up was concerned. The turntable's power supply had already been on for a while, so that was already warmed up. So I put that to one side. What was left was the turntable mechanics themselves. And, well, I wasn't really convinced that they were warming up at all during actual play. What did strike me was the cartridge, and I wondered whether the cartridge itself was warming up as I was listening to these reviewed speakers. Afterwards, I did further tests, and my suspicions grew that the cartridge itself needed a quick warm-up before I used it to listen to. So that's what I do. I basically run the cartridge along one side of an LP, so you're looking at, what, 20 minutes or so, and then it seems to be fine. And I've done that ever since. One side of an LP, no problem. You don't get that change in sound quality, those shifts around the mid-range, and that seems to do the job. So take that tip for what it is. You can use it or lose it. It's up to you, of course, but give it a try. And if you do try, let me know what you think. It works for me. I can certainly hear the difference, and I use it as part of my warm-up routine every time I turn on my hi-fi. I'll think up a few more hints and tips for next time. And as for next time, well, I may chop and change the content. The news is in solid stone, so you will always get news. But for the rest of the content, I may chop and change. It depends what's going on at the time. Anyway, I hope you liked this first video of hi-fi news, etc. Let me know what you think. And don't forget, Monday there's a formal hi-fi review, something Bluesound flavored. I hope I can have your company then. Don't forget, downstairs there are links to my website and my Facebook group, which you're welcome to join, and also Patreon. And there are hot links, chapter headings, which you can use to navigate around this video. I'll be back Monday, as I say, and I hope you can join me then. Until that time, folks, bye-bye for now.